I just kept walking, and then I heard the sound again, and as I turned, the one that was closest just brought his fist down on the back of my neck as hard as he could, and just stunned me, knocked me to the ground, and then they started kicking me and punching me and screaming over and over, faggot, 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 and then one of them, blade in hand, goes to my throat, and the blade bounced off my chin, and they started giggling and ran down the street. When I tried to stand up, I realized the first blow had been with a knife, and that I was bleeding profusely. I was able to crawl back to my apartment complex and got just inside the courtyard before I lost consciousness, fortunately in front of the mailboxes. And one of my neighbors, drifting off to sleep, remembered he neglected to bring in his mail and went out and found me lying there in this enormous pool of blood. He called the police came, they thought it had expired, and I had a photo of it. They took the crime scene photo. I used it as a Christmas card that year. So again, you know, I joke about it because it's the only way I can tell it. While all this was going on, my very best friend in the world was dying at his parents' home in Providence, Rhode Island. His name was Marvin Feldman, and we met when we both had the most god-awful job in the world. We were selling Time Life books over the telephone. Crushingly boring. 4-hour shifts ready to just... And so to pass the time, I would come up with different nom de phone. And I would call people up and I would say, "Hello, Mrs. Smith. Hi, this is Willie Loman calling for Time Life books in San Francisco." Those of you who did not just laugh need to read Arthur Miller's great play, Death of a Salesman. Nobody ever got it, don't feel bad. And so one day I have hair down to here, you know, and I'm standing on top of my desk shrieking this nonsense into the phone, and I heard a burst of laughter, and I turned around, and there was a new boy working at Time Life. And he was so fine. He had this curly brown hair and these cheekbones and these big pale blue-gray eyes, and I thought, this has got to be the most beautiful boy I've ever seen in my life. We had our very first date that night. I took him to a really romantic little spot called The Stud on Folsom Street. And we played pool and danced and made out behind the cigarette machine, and then he walked me home, and I looked into those beautiful blue-gray eyes and I said, "Would you like to come in and spend the night?" And he looked back, he said, "You know, I think we're going to be friends." Don't you just hate it when that happens? Oh, just when I need another friend, great. But, you know, I hope every one of you, I wish for each of you a long and healthy life. I wish for all of you 100 years. And at the end of your lives, when you look back at your lives, if you ever had a friend like I had with Marvin, you would be very, very lucky. You know, he was the best friend I've ever had in my life. And by the time his mom called, it was just the two of us left of our circle. I was the center of a circle of mostly political West Coast people. He was the center of a circle of mostly East Coast theater people. Our circles merged. We maintained a flat in San Francisco, one in Manhattan, one in Berlin. Wherever a new theater a new play was opening, we were there. Or were fighting police somewhere, we were there. And it was just a wonderful time, and our friends were brilliant. Had they lived, my friends would have be taking home Pulitzers and Emmys. They'd be serving in Congress. Of my circle of friends, I was, believe me, the least interesting and the least talented and the least ambitious. They would have all done extraordinary things. And when Esther Feldman called me to say that Marvin was dying, it was really the last of our circle. And you're all going to make this trip if you haven't done it yet. You know, you get on a bus or a plane or a train, and you're going to say goodbye to somebody that you love so much and will never see again. All I felt I had to take to Marvin was my own hatred and fear and despair, because by the end of that year, that's all that was left in my heart was hatred for straight people. I hated straight people. And fear of what was going to happen to me, and despair that the world would ever wake up and respond. But all of that really evaporated when I walked into Esther Feldman's kitchen and smelled the food that she was cooking and felt the love and solidarity of his family. And I was so grateful when I walked into his room and saw him there, and he opened his eyes, and I could see those beautiful blue-gray eyes, and he was functioning. The virus had spared his brain and his eyes, whereas most of my friends had died before they died, went blind from retinitis and mad from dementia. But I could still talk to him. I helped him divide up his famous sweater collection. And we went through, he created this elaborate scam with the insurance company so that his mother and father wouldn't lose their homes trying to care for him, as so many of our friends' parents had lost all of their savings in their homes because they didn't have insurance. And we waited for him to die, and he died on October 10th, 1986. I went home and just shut down. You know, I thought, that's it. I was ready to die. I was ready to go, and then walking in the park one day, I ran into my friend Joseph, with whom I'd been the year before when we were putting up the posters, and stopped at Marcello's Pizza Parlor and read the headline of 1,000 Dead. And I hadn't seen Joseph in months, and he was skinny, and his eyes were kind of gray, and his skin was gray, and he didn't look good. And I said, Joseph, are you all right? And he said, I don't want to talk about it, but I've been thinking about that quilt idea, and it's time we do it. It makes sense. He stole some fabric from this theater supply company that he worked for. I went down in the basement and found all the spray paint left over from Ronald Reagan's last visit to San Francisco. And we went in the backyard and created the first 2 panels of the AIDS Memorial Quilt. How many of you have made panels for the AIDS Memorial Quilt? I knew there'd be some. You know, it's hard to do. It's difficult. Most of us aren't artists, and I think it's hard enough to describe verbally why we love people. You can say, oh, well, you know, he's just a straight-up guy. He always tells me what's on his mind, or she's always got a joke to fix the sad moments, or, you know, whatever. But to come up with a visual representation, it's really challenging. And I thought about Marvin and the stories his family shared with me, and I thought, you know, really what it came down to with Marvin Feldman was that when he was a little boy, he came to understand that he was a homosexual and a Jew, and that he belonged to 2 classes of people that had been subjected to genocide in his parents' time. And I think growing up with that informed everything about him, his sense of humor, his ambition, probably the way he moved on the dance floor. It all was connected to growing up knowing that he was one of these people that could be killed by his neighbors if things went wrong. And so in my pathetic attempt, non-artistic attempt to convey this, I cut out triangular stencils and I spray painted blue and pink triangles. The pink triangle, of course, the death symbol from the death camp symbol that the Nazis gave to homosexuals, and I had some overlap to form Stars of David. It was ugly, but fortunately Marvin has many friends who made quilt panels, and there are now many panels for Marvin Feldman, and all but one are beautiful. Before he died, Harvey Milk called for the first March on Washington for lesbian and gay rights. He didn't live long enough to see it, but it happened in 1979. October 11th of this year is the 30th anniversary of the first March on Washington, and we are marching again. Now, I want to just talk about this, and then I'll take your questions and comments, but I didn't set out to do this. Last fall, after the election and after the film came out, lots and lots of young people started writing to me and saying, we want to march on Washington. I said, I don't think it's a good idea, because previous marches were incredibly complex, involved this long process of organizing, spent a lot of money, there were scandals around the money, they turned into sort of lollapaloozas, a lot of the politics was diluted, and I just didn't think it made sense. I also had a lot of hope for the new president, and I'd spent a lot of time campaigning for him. I chose to leave California during the Prop 8 campaign and go to Nevada with my union to campaign for Barack Obama, and we won Nevada. And I came home, and the lights blinking on my old answering machine on my old landline that I never use anymore, but that's the published number, and I punched the button, and there's we have an important message for you from Democratic presidential candidate Barack Obama. And then there's Barack Obama's voice saying, I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. And then the voice comes back, vote yes on 8. And Election Day happened, and we start to celebrate when we realize that this country finally has elected Miracle